from the Money Mob. This week's podcast, we have a serious brother. I've known this brother for a number of years, doing some serious work directly in regards to our youth. And I want to introduce to our brother Nana Aygeman from Access UK. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon.
How you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. Yourself?
I'm not too bad. Surviving.
Indeed.
Right. Oh, obviously, first things first, brother. 'Cause you are very, very active. I mean, how are you finding the situation? Obviously we're still, pretty much kind of coming out of lockdown. But I mean, how are you finding it so far?
You know what? Initially, it was a bit of a shock, like most people. But because I'm a very practical and kind of focused person, I was like, okay, cool, it's happened. What are we going to do about it? So I spent the first week or two just kind of restructuring my days, looking at what's going on, looking at like the pros and cons. And what I actually found was that in an ironic way, my business in particular, what I do for living, the demand for those services was going to dramatically increase.
Wow.
Rather than decrease. So what I found was I was inundated with requests for support, myself and obviously my staff members, and just in general, because obviously, what we obviously support people into work and training, etc., and also have complementary services, for example, supporting people with mental well-being, things. So it all came to the fore. So yeah, we just had a lot of calls, a lot of demand, a lot of requests.
Yeah.
So we just been grafting away, carrying on as usual, really, but obviously doing it from a virtual perspective.
Okay. So to our viewers, please give our viewers an idea of exactly what Access UK is all about.
Okay, so Access stands for African, Caribbean Careers and Employment Support Services.
Wow, okay.
That's the acronym for Access UK. And the idea for Access came about off the back of the 2011 riots. Because what we found was that there was no representative services to address the specific needs of young Black African people. Within the careers, the labor market, etc. So we were basically set up to fill in these gaps that we know are there. So, for example, in the UK, if you're a Black graduate and you got a first class degree, you're twice more likely to be unemployed than a white person, a white graduate. Conversely, if you're between 16 and 24, and you're twice more likely to be unemployed than a white person. I think it was 1 in 2, 50% youth unemployment at the time that we started Access UK. So we were basically set up to fill that void that there is in terms of careers and guidance, finding employment, starting a new business, etc. Just to fill that gap, really, and provide a really tailored service for our people that looks at helping them to circumvent the challenges that we know that are there in the labour market and everywhere else. So that's essentially what Access UK is. And we're set up as a social enterprise / charity. So a lot of our provisions is free to the beneficiary, but there's a third party that's paying for that engagement. So we have contracts with government, local government, private institutions, etc. So that's what we do. We just help our young people into work, training. I always talk about the 3 E's. So that's education, employment, and enterprise. Those are the 3 key areas that we specialize in.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so I mean, in your words, what is the philosophy What's your philosophy in regards to what Access UK kind of stands for?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, the clue is in the name. You know, the fact that it's specifically looking at the challenges that our young people face within this environment.
Yes.
So, for instance, if a young person from our community goes into the job centre looking for work, for example, and they engage an advisor there, and they say to the advisor, you know what, someone called Nana told me that, I'm twice more likely to be unemployed and I'm going to struggle to get employment. They might look at that person that they're insane, but actually it's a fact. And most of this data comes from their department the Department for Work and Pensions. So the data is all there. So my role, my organization's role is to help that young person in that predicament to get over those barriers by giving them practical tips and practical assistance to help them. So for instance, we have connections with a lot of employers that are looking for so-called BAME talent, as they call it, or black talent. Yeah. We have a lot of talented people with our community, but a lot of them can't find work. So we help them with that process. So we will, for example, connect that young person that's looking for work with that employer who says they can't find that black talent.
Okay.
So brokerage service. We help young people that want to start their own business, but just don't know how. And within that, we look at the practicalities of a young black person starting their own business, because it's not the same as a white person.
Indeed.
They don't follow the same, they don't have necessarily the same challenges. So in all of it, it's about really having tailored, bespoke solutions for young black people. Something that's not generic, and it's not wishy-washy. It's really looking at what is it that's stopping this young person from, doing what they need to do. That's all it is. That's the key difference between, say, us and, say, a Princess Trust or any other kind of youth services out there. Because that's the mistake people make. They say, well, what's the difference between you and say this and say that? The key difference is that we are structured to support a young black person. That's a key difference.
Okay.
So how to do that is it's a lot different from how other people will engage our youth. Because the system presupposes when a young person goes into those services that there's no different. There is no they're working on an even playing field, and we know that's not correct.
Yes.
And all the data and all the government statistics back up that. So it's just about providing the solutions, really.
Okay. So what you actually touched on a really serious point of questions here, and I just want to kind of ask you, when you are working specifically with the young person, could you just give us maybe I don't know one or two key or even three key things that you will kind of let a young person know when he's now looking to now into that kind of job market?
What are key things?
Yes.
I mean, it's interesting, that question, because we obviously have key things there, but we work on the basis that everyone's an individual.
Right.
So, and that's the thing that mainstream services don't do.
Right.
Mainstream services bracket all our youth into put them in the same pot. They have preconceptions and stereotypes of young black people, which we don't have because we're black ourselves and we understand where they're coming from. So if someone comes into our organization, we really take on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
Because their circumstance will determine what kind of advice we give them. So for instance, if a young person is on the streets, it's a street person, and they come in, engage us, and say, you know what, Nana, or any of my staff members, I really want to work, and but I find it an issue to wear a suit for an interview, for instance, or I haven't even got a suit. We would explain the reason why they need to wear a suit for that interview, and the psychology behind wearing a suit or dressing a particular way for a certain industry.
Yes.
Just as someone working in construction will wear a hard hat because it's conducive for that environment.
Yes.
And wear a high vest is the same way, you know, someone in the army will carry a gun and wear, you know, camouflage. You know, you wear a particular attire for particular fields. It is what it is. Now, if that young person still doesn't understand that, we need to look at what is it exactly you're looking for.
Yes.
Because if you don't want to comply to those rules, then you have to look for an alternative for yourself.
Yes.
Where you can wear whatever you want.
Yes.
But what is that alternative? Is that viable or not? So we go through all these things with our young people, and we can have these conversations with them because they're looking at somebody that looks like them.
That's right.
So it's an easy conversation. They're not going to find it necessarily patronizing or anything like that because they know we're coming from the same place. And what they call cultural competence is a key component of service delivery that's missing from the mainstream.
Right.
Is that lack of understanding of culture and where we were coming from. I mean, coming from Ghana, for instance, I was always taught, or I was always brought up not to make too much eye contact with adults.
Yeah.
Because it's a sign of rudeness.
That's right.
You know? But then I had to, when I came to this country, I had to learn that it was the opposite.
That's right.
Eye contact is seen as, you know, it's fixed. So even learning certain subtle things like teaching our young people about maintaining eye contact, you know, shaking hands, certain etiquettes that you need to learn when you're in a work environment, you know, keeping time, making sure you're ahead of time, for instance.
Yeah.
Being organized, having simple things like having like a diary, you know, using a diary. I use diaries, and it's a very, very effective tool. It only costs, what, £1 to buy a diary, a paper diary? So little things like that can make a big, big difference to your whole kind of organizing your life and making sure you're productive.
Yes.
So these are the kind of stuff that we kind of impart on our young people to help them through that journey.
Okay. Now, moving on to someone who is, you know, looking to kind of be self-employed. Okay. All right. Because I know that you work with a lot of brothers and sisters who were self-employed out on road. Yeah. to put a not too fine a point on it. So how are you now going to be able to have them transition from a self-employment kind of situation where a man was, you know, earning a certain amount of money to a man now saying, well, okay, I'm going to be self-employed and you know, earning the kind of money that's not going to cost me my life?
You know, that's an excellent question. Excellent. And it's multi-layered.
Yes.
First of all, making a transition from quote unquote the road to legitimacy is a mindset challenge.
Right.
That's a key thing. That's why on our programs, for instance, we work with a lot of historians, a lot of Black educators, because essentially once you understand in the context of your history, you're more likely to make a successful transition. Right. If you understand the picture. Yeah, a lot of the youth violence that's going on, a lot of it stems from a lack of self-knowledge and a lack of self-love.
Right.
So it's about understanding all that. So not only do we provide careers and guidance services, we also provide complementary education, which is Black history education, to kind of complement that along that way. So that's the first thing. So it's a mindset challenge. So you need to convince, for example, somebody's earning £100 an hour on the streets to go into a job that's paying them £10 an hour. You're never going to do it until you have that buy-in mentally. You're never going to do it. And also they understand the long-term benefits of making that transition.
Of course.
Right. Of course. The second point is, which I always talk about, is the notion that every young person is making lots of money on the streets. It's also a complete fallacy. Most young people are not making no money. In truth, there are some people that are making money, but they're few and far between. So when you're speaking to a young person that actually knows that within their heart that actually, if they look at the amount of hours they're putting in, the risk they're taking, and the amount of money they're left with at the end of the week or the end of the month, it's not worth it. So if somebody like me comes up to them and says, you know what, we've got these options for you, because it's about options. It's about options at the end of the day. Because you're telling a man to stop doing what they're doing. What are you going to give them in return for that? What's their exchange? Right. So that's where you look at what are the viable alternatives for that young person. And that's why we make a point of making sure we're on top of what's available out there for them, whether it be in training, jobs, business startup, whatever it is. So when they engage our services, we've actually got real pathways and a variety of pathways for them, not just in music, not just in sports, in any endeavor that they choose to be. You know, we've got links in corporates, banking, you know, tech, sports, what have you. All across the range, we have links. So it's just about plugging that young person into that alternative. So, I mean, to me, those are the two main things, having options and also challenging the mindset and really kind of assessing or helping them to assess the pros and cons of that lifestyle, you know, because even the drug business is a saturated market. They know this. They know every Tom, Dick and Harry wants to be a shotter or thinks they're a shotter. So in that pool of economy, there is not much piece of the cake for you to take.
Right.
You know? There is nothing for you to take. It's been, you know, it's a cornered market. And that's what even led to a lot of the increase in people leaving London to go out in the counties.
Oh.
Hence the county lines epidemic, as it were, because we were trying to break into new markets because the London market is saturated. Okay? So when you look at, especially for young people, you look at, like I said, the pros, the cons, really, you can only, it's a no-brainer. You can only come to one conclusion.
Right.
But we help them to solidify that conclusion by giving them real alternatives.
Okay, I hear you.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you just before I go towards the end, what are some of the myths, myth busting things that we could do in regards to our young? You know what I mean? I want to hear, you know, what's the myths about our young?
You hear me some great questions, brother. Great questions. I'll tell you what the myths are. The popular myths are. One of them is the key one, which even some black people end up getting drawn into it. It's the whole notion that they're all a bunch of young criminals.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all criminals, they're this, they're that. But the reality is that, you know, the criminal element in our community represents a very, very, very small fraction of the community. You know, the majority of our youth are highly educated. In fact, the data will show you that they're more educated than, you know, your typical white working class person.
Wow.
At the moment, there's a crisis amongst white working class people, even in terms of getting a basic education, let alone, you know, higher education. So when the government talks about schemes like widening participation, a lot of it is targeted at white working class people, not necessarily black people.
Right.
Because we're going to universities high numbers. The challenge is, because of systematic racism, that's not being converted into jobs, etc.
Right.
But in terms of numbers, the numbers are huge and people are getting educated and they're doing very well, numerically. But all the focus is on the small groups of young people that engage in things that they shouldn't be engaged in. So that's one of the myths. The other myth, I suppose, relates to the notion also that you know, people don't want to do for self. You know, they kind of rely on the state and all this other rubbish. We know 110% that our youth, especially the ones we engage, want to stand on their own feet, want to do for self.
Exactly.
A lot of them though, they just don't have the processes and don't have an understanding of the pathways to get to where they need to go to. I mean, things like, for example, we're aware that even when you're starting a business as a young black person, getting access to credit and finance is very, very difficult. Again, we're working with groups like the Princess Trust at the moment to create a solution for that problem. You know, how do you circumvent the fact that somebody has got intelligence and announced to do start their own business, but because their name is Ade, whatever, or Nana Aygeman, they're getting rejected at a point of, application for finance. How do you circumvent that? So we're looking at alternative means of financing young black youth that want to get into business. So I mean, those are the two things in my line of business. Those are probably the two main kind of myths and misconceptions that are there. Probably another misconception is the solution outside of this country. That's probably another misconception.
Okay, yeah,
a
talk
myth.
to me about that. Okay, got out there. All right.
Yeah, because again, looking at, for example, graduates who've been educated to go and work for, somebody else that don't look like them. They don't realize that their skills are invaluable and their skills are highly sought abroad, whether you be in the Caribbean, whether you be in Africa, wherever it may be, particularly Africa. So there's a high demand for the skills abroad. Mm-hmm. And we're not talking about employers over there, paying peanuts to employ these people. These are they're paying wages that are on par with what you earn in the West. But not only that, you're in your own environment. You get the perks of maybe having your own property, car, assistance in a house, fine weather, fine food. What more do you need?
That's right.
But because of that, because of the myth of surrounding Africa and back home, a lot of people don't really venture or go down that route. Right. Conversely, there's lots of incentives for people to invest back home as well and start their own business. And the youth, like I said, the youth that are coming out of universities, the prime time now to go back.
Yes.
To go back with the sort of COVID-19 and everything else has changed. I think people have come to realize now that how fragile our status was then, but it's even more now in a totally post-COVID world. So you really need to look at the options that are available for you to tap into outside of this environment.
Indeed.
So for me, that's another popular myth that we need to dispel, that Africa is a breadbasket and there's nothing really happening over there. There's lots of opportunities over there. Absolutely. I had friends that left this country 15, 20 years ago that are multi-millionaires in Africa right now, multi-millionaires. And they would never in a million years been able to achieve that objective if they stayed over here.
Absolutely.
Under the false pretense that there's a safety net here for somebody. There's nothing. Yeah. It's an illusion. So there are opportunities, not for everybody, I agree, but there are definitely opportunities to invest, to work, to contribute back home, Africa, the Caribbean. This is there. And I think people need to look at that as an option as well, instead of just being dependent on a system that really doesn't really care about black folk.
Okay, thank you so much. So yeah. My final question is next to my final question, what is the plan for the future of Access UK? What are the plans?
The plans are, like I said, there's going to be a huge demand for our services in terms of the economy, because we know that there's a recession that the Chancellor's definitely confirmed is going to happen, which I was talking about months ago. It might even turn out to be a depression. So we know that our community is going to be, the first to feel the effects of the economic downturn. So obviously, in terms of our services, we know for a fact that there's going to be a hike in demand for our assistance, helping our people to get out of the situation. So we know that. So prior to COVID, obviously our plans were always to expand, and we operate from our 3 London areas, mainly Hackney, Haringey, and Brent. And we've done bits and pieces across London.
Yes.
But going down is definitely all about expansion and making sure we have a presence in every single area in London and the UK where our people are at. Indeed. So whether it's Bristol, whether it's Manchester, Liverpool, wherever we may be in high numbers, Birmingham, that's where we aim to be, to make sure we're on the ground, we engage in the community and providing solutions on the ground.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, the only last thing I wanted to ask, obviously, and our viewers want to know where we can contact you and what's your details, your social media handles.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's obviously the www.accessuk.org will give you the website. And we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're on Insta. And obviously the Facebook is Access UK Charity, Twitter @AccessUK_org, and Instagram is Access_UK. So all Access UK. So you find us online.
Fantastic.
And our email address, really wants to send me an email, is info@accessuk.org.
Fantastic. Well, Nana, to say that was a fantastic interview is an understatement. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem. So, viewers, make sure that you watch this particular interview. Please, comment, like, and more importantly, make sure you subscribe to the Money Mob channel. And with that, I want to, say you take care and goodbye. Brothers and sisters, I want to just say two things.